Hello and welcome to Mrs. Allen's history lesson. This one is specifically about the boom in the 1920s. It will be useful to GCSE students who are studying America in this time period. Firstly, it's important to recognise the 5 causes of the boom. 3 Republican presidents during this time ensured that business was thriving and people were buying American goods. Technology was rapidly developing. Mass production became the new way to produce goods, especially in the motor industry. Hire purchase meant that people could have the goods that they wanted in their homes, and companies were able to expand as they gained money from selling shares on the stock exchange. Now let's look at the Republican policies in a bit more detail. Harding introduced the Fordney-McCumber Tariff Act, which imposed tax on goods from foreign countries. This made these goods more expensive and therefore encouraged Americans to buy American goods only. Coolidge continued the laissez-faire policy, giving businessmen the freedom to make a profit and become rich. Many businesses prospered during this time. Hoover had the belief of rugged individualism. He believed that people should not depend on the government for help. He believed that hard work was the way out of poverty, though this viewpoint lost popularity after the Wall Street crash. In the 1920s, America became the first major consumer society. With help from mass production and sophisticated advertising, demand for goods rose by 20%. It was now common to have electricity-powered products in the home, like refrigerators and washing machines. We're going to see what impact this had on women shortly. Both car and air travel was now incredibly popular too. Now to focus on the winners and losers of the boom. I suggest you pause each slide and put the information into a graph. The biggest winners were the owners of the new industries. Industries such as chemical, electric, automobile and construction did very well at this time. Their employees also benefited. It was easy for white people, mainly men, to find jobs on the new assembly lines. This employment came with a good salary and gave more people money to spend on leisure and new products, such as radios. Radios became so important because of the prospering entertainment industry. Cinema was important as well as jazz. The performers and movie stars inspired a generation. Behaviour and dress sense was imitated. Women who could afford the lifestyle became flappers. Women such as Clara Bow and Bessie Smith rose to fame. There were many successful black jazz performers. However, racism did still exist in the industry. I encourage you to research the Harlem Renaissance. Harlem in New York City became the cultural mecca at this time. The next group who largely benefited were women. Middle-class women now had a wider access to different types of jobs. Because of this, they were gaining more freedom and women started to smoke and drink in public. Clothing and hairstyle changed, allowing women to enjoy a far more active life. With new electric products like Hoovers, middle-class women had more time to enjoy their freedom. Very little change for women who were living in poverty. Now on to those who did not benefit. Firstly, the old industries, cotton, coal and shipbuilding. Overproduction and underconsumption had a damaging effect on these industries. As oil became more popular, the coal industry suffered. The same is true with the cotton industry being replaced with new synthetic fibres. Due to the First World War ending and the development of air travel, shipbuilding was another major industry that was forced to significantly cut their workforce. Immigration was high during this time period, but immigrants did not benefit from the boom. They faced constant prejudice and discrimination. Unemployment rates for immigrants remained high throughout the 1920s. Many were forced to turn to crime and prostitution, which further fueled the discrimination towards them. As processed foods also became popular, farmers were also struggling. As prices fell due to overproduction, more and more farmers got into debt until eventually they had to sell their farms and leave. By 1928, half of all USA farmers were living in poverty. They were forced to wander around America looking for any work that they could take. The final group who did not benefit from the boom were Black Americans. Most in the South worked on small farms owned by white landlords. They lived in immense poverty, like the house that you can see in the picture. Segregation due to the Jim Crow laws made life even more difficult. Facilities such as schools for black people were heavily underfunded. On top of this, black people lived in constant fear of their lives as the KKK, particularly in southern states, grew in popularity. Many decided to emigrate north to cities like New York and Chicago, though life remained hard, with many being forced to live in ghettos and were often the last hired and first to be fired. Although a civil rights movement was developing at this time, it wasn't until 30 years later that people began to listen. Thank you for watching. I now suggest you make a graph to show who the boom had a minor and major impact on. You can find this information and more on the BBC Bite Size website.